all rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I guess if you could call the roll of the council, and then we will go sit in the audience for presentation.
Bartholomew,
Here.
Evers,
Here.
Fowler, Kerr,
Here.
Parker, Rousseau, here. President Poznanski,
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, present, 2 absent.
And then we will allow you guys to take over.
Wonderful.
Have.
We going out there? Yeah.
Good evening. Hi, everybody. I'm Carmen Wells Quigg with the Economic Growth Institute. Thank you, President Poznanski, members of the council, and residents and visitors from the village of Romeo. We appreciate you welcoming us, myself and my colleague, Kevin Krasinski, here tonight to talk to you about the EV-TIP program and the Economic Growth Institute. It is our pleasure to be here today. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I'll have Kevin introduce himself as well, and then we're going to go through a presentation about the program and what we've been doing to date, as well as what our next steps are. And we're going to run through a little bit about instructions about next steps, where there's going to be opportunity for engagement. So I have a background in community engagement. I've been working with the Economic Growth Institute for about 15 years. The Economic Growth Institute has a vision of equitable economic growth for the communities, companies, and research spaces that we work in. We also have a new pillar of workforce development that we're uplifting through our institute. We're housed at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor campus, but we have relationships with the Flint campus as well and other academic institutions here in Michigan and beyond. Most of the work that we do is here in Michigan, although we have some initiatives that take us outside of Michigan to the upper Great Lakes states, mainly of Ohio and Indiana, but sometimes our work expands to other states as well. We've done work most recently in coal communities in Virginia. We've also done work in auto communities in Wisconsin. Anywhere where there's some sort of economic need, our team springs into action and leverages federal, state, and sometimes foundation funding to do the work that we do. I want to make a particular note of saying that our work is not funded by the University of Michigan, although we're supported with some overhead. The work that we do is all driven based on funding that our team members bring into our institute to in turn serve the clients that we serve. I'm the director of the Community Development Department, and what that means is we serve local governments, state government. We also service work groups, coalitions, nonprofits, NGOs, those groups who are seeking to advance economic development and other initiatives underneath that to strengthen and grow their community, whether it's a physical location or a community of people. We also have a couple of other pillars within our institute, as I mentioned. We have a company pillar, we say, our department, which really serves to work at assisting small to medium-sized businesses. And when we say medium, it goes up to really 500 employees, but really, we tend to work with those that are around 100 to 200 employees, helping those companies strengthen and grow and stabilize to be really, the fabric that that the communities need to exist. We also have a research department. Interestingly enough, our research department partnered with us on this engagement. There's been economic impact analysis done as a result of the closure of the Ford plant to help inform the conversations we've been having with this engagement. And then we also have a newly formed workforce development department. And so that department is really bringing in resources now to help grow, because we see just a strong demand to provide that resource and have that expertise within EGI to be able to service the clients that we serve. So my background is in communications and community development, and it is my pleasure to be with you today. Kevin, I'll have you introduce yourself, please.
No, thank you. I'll add my thanks to Carmen's for all of you attending this evening. My background is mostly on the company side. Most of the programs I'm involved with is directly supporting companies. I've been with the Institute about 7 years now. I'm assisting Carmen on this program because we follow a method that she's going to introduce tonight, and we're both certified coaches in that method. So some of the other programs that we have are, specifically we have a program right now that helps companies who are being impacted by the shift to EV. And happy to talk about any companies you might know. They can get up to $100,000 co-funding to do projects. And so if you're thinking of a company possibly. There's another program that's also companies that can help DOD or support DOD's interest in energy storage and battery manufacturing. There's co-funding available for companies in that as well. So if after this is over, if you want to talk about any of that, you might know a company, we're happy to connect and talk to them. There's no cost to the companies to get this co-funding. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. Thanks again.
Yeah. And our contact information will be part of the slide deck, which we can share copies of. My business cards are at the back as well. And I'll just make a note, housekeeping note, if you didn't have a chance to sign in, please feel free to do that so that we can follow up with you after today's meeting. All right. Let's get started. So today we're going to be going through introductions, which we just did. We're going to talk about the Electric Vehicle Transformation Impact Project, the reason why we're here. I'll give you a little bit of background on what the goal of the program is and what we hope to accomplish with it. We'll talk about the program overview and our activities to date. And then we're really going to be talking about the project idea submission phase, which is the phase that we're in right now. We're going to talk about, we're going to walk you through what that looks like so that you have instructions on how to do that. And then we're also going to talk about the scoring process. We'll talk about next steps, and we'll answer any questions that everybody has. So the EV tip, what we call for short, is funded by the state of Michigan, MEDC, Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, or sometimes it's called OFME for short. And there's an initiative underneath that umbrella called the Mobility Future Initiative. And that was driven by not only MEDC, but also other state agencies that came together to really get out ahead of the shift to electric vehicles and the change to the energy economy, as well as the change to the climate solution change that was happening here in Michigan, and really wanted to make a holistic effort towards supporting residents and communities through this change. So we know that this focus is driven based on the mobility change and the automotive industry changes here, but really it's a multi-agency effort, and I really want to make sure I make note of that, and also reference, again, the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification for funding this. We find that through our work, there are opportunities to have projects and initiatives fully funded, and this is one of those. So we're really grateful that there is no cost share match to the village for being involved in this initiative. Also, the village of Romeo was identified as the first community to receive services from this because of the timeline of the Ford engine plant, as well as the engagement of the village leadership in not only the task force that's being held up at the county level, but also the impacts that have been recognized that are due to the closure of the plant. So this is the first community that's happening as a part of this initiative, and there are a lot of resources at the state level that we're hoping to help bridge down to the village of Romeo. So the goal of the program is to provide support services to the communities affected by the plant closures. So there are other communities that are targeted, but again, as I mentioned, Romeo is the first one that's really benefiting from this initiative. And the assistance is for communities that have a demonstrated impact economically due to the closure, and as well as those that might want further opportunities and access to resources as a result of the shift to electric vehicles. The focus is to address issues including a reduced tax base, loss of employment opportunities, reduction in services as it relates to those two efforts, possible site remediation, environmental justice concerns, and then general need for economic development to help overcome some of these challenges. As Kevin mentioned, the process that we've been leading with the village to do strategic planning, we're going to outline here. That's only one phase that's part of this project, part of this multi-prong approach. So the assistance, more comprehensively, that's part of the initiative, includes economic impact analysis. So there was a research report that was developed by our research team documenting the impacts due to the loss of the major employer here in the village of Romeo, and talked about the other secondary and tertiary impacts due to the closure that have affected the secondary and other tier markets here. We also are providing the technical assistance through the strategic planning conversations that we've been having, and then also talking about other resource identification. Kevin and I are bringing expertise of EGI to these conversations, so much like he mentioned a couple of other programs that are out there. As we get toward the end of the strategic planning process, there'll likely be other things that we want to stack on top of the strategic planning to talk about what projects not only can we identify, but other programs that are available for the village as well as the businesses and residents in the village. The community engagement, we like to be able to engage with the community in sessions such like this, talk to folks on the phone, have meetings here in the village, and likewise. So we're always open to having further meetings like this to show progress and report out on our activities. And then implementation funding for selected projects. So we're thrilled to be able to say that the state also has offered up funding at no cost share for implementation of projects. So we're looking to get to that phase of talking about what types of projects could work toward the strategic plan, and we'll be excited to kind of get to that phase and help manage that process. Our goal also is to help with capacity building, our goal at EGI, so as much as possible minimize kind of the demand to participate in a program like this when folks typically have already full plate. So our activities to date. We at EGI were invited to participate in the Romeo Ford Engine Plant Task Force. So, we see President Poznanski. We also see other members who are part of the task force and listen and learn and try and connect and think about ideas for connecting resources down the road. We've done the economic impact analysis piece, and then the strategic planning activities, which we're going to talk a little bit more about at today's meeting in depth. So the economic impact analysis, I'm not going to go into detail about that right now. That was something that was shared with village leadership, and it is available. Just wanted to make mention of it here. It is a tool that we're using to help us with our conversations, and I wanted to make sure that we included it in this presentation today as a tool for furthering our conversations. So the strategic planning is what Kevin and myself have been working with the village leadership and other departments, as well as the DDA and the chamber, to really identify a strategy to strengthen and grow the village of Romeo. And when we say grow, we're not necessarily talking about in size, but we're really talking about, what are tips, strategies, innovation activities that the village could address with some of these project funds in order to possibly stabilize due to the ripple effects of the closure of the major employer, okay? So there have been conversations and drafts here. We'll share some of that information today, but our strategic planning process overview has 5 steps that I'll just make mention of briefly here. One of them is to strategize. So even starting last year, we started talking about what this engagement might look like, what would be some things that should be outlined in a goal for the strategic plan. We looked at the master plan and drew from that. We talked about new ideas and initiatives and activities that were happening in the village and in the other spaces, and came up with a goal, came up with priorities, and came up with objectives to build out that master plan, that strategic plan. Then what we also did is we talked to the strategy team about who might be subject matter experts that we could reach out to on the EGI side and ask them for their input as it relates to developing what we call desirability criteria, which that really means is criteria for which projects could be scored and strategically aligned within the strategic plan down the road. So we had some really good conversations with a lot of really interested stakeholders, not only locals, but some within the ecosystem, like from MML and Michigan Main Street Association and others, as well as folks from here, right in the village of Romeo. And we were able to gather more information to build out the strategic plan. One of the reasons why that piece is included in the strategic planning process is to, one, help remove bias as it relates to creating the strategic plan. Also, seek outside expertise from those who are also likely already leveraging their resources for the village. Those like SEMCOG and others were also on our list, but also just have that inside expertise to lend to it. So that was a part of the process that we completed earlier this year. And we also had a chance to work with the strategy team on what we call a quantify step, which is just measuring the weighting for each of the priorities and the objectives. So we did that at the last meeting that we were here in the village. So we've got a couple more steps to go, but we're closer to the finish line than we are the starting line. And this score step, which is number 4, really includes project idea submission and scoring. And we're going to be talking about that today. The select step comes after that. We have a meeting scheduled with the strategy team a week from Friday to go through that step when we come back. All right. So I'm going to run through these next slides pretty quickly, but I'm going to share with you the goal that was developed by the strategic team. It reads as follows. To serve the village of Romeo residents, businesses, and nonprofit, in parentheses, service organizations by fostering an environment of economic stability, resiliency, and growth. There was a very concerted effort to include the residents and the businesses and the service organizations in this goal overall. There are priorities and objectives that address visitors as well, because that is part of the economic development priority. So there is a recognition that the visitors help contribute to the economic function of the village. I know that this is small and hard to read, so I'm going to read it for you, but this is what our strategic plan scorecard is shaping up to look like. The goal, which is across the top, is what I read to you a couple of slides ago. The priorities that were identified included 4 that were very comprehensive, we felt, and very thoughtful. 1, quality of life. 2, asset management. 3, economic development. And 4, operations. And each of those priorities have a working definition behind it that was developed by the strategy team. I read them from left to right. Those numbers were in no way kind of an emphasis of priority or hierarchy. We did do some weighting, and that's where the bubbles come in. And interestingly enough, the team felt like they actually scored very close in priority across the board. So you can't see it, I'll read it, and we'll go into more detail with this later, but quality of life had an emphasis, a scale of 22%, asset management 31%, economic development at 22%, and operations at 26%. So for us, we really feel like those are pretty closely aligned and all very important priorities. Underneath those priorities, there's either 2, 3, or 4 objectives, and I'll read them because again, I understand this is really small. Underneath quality of life, there are 3 objectives: livability and great neighborhoods, downtown vitality for residents, transportation and walkability and accessibility. Asset management includes functional, safe, and effective as it relates to asset management. Economic development had 4 objectives developed: downtown vitality for businesses, tourism, placemaking, and transportation walkability and accessibility. You might see that that's similar to one underneath quality of life. Quality of life really focused on residents, and economic development focused on businesses and visitors. And then lastly, we have operations, and there are 2 objectives there: methods and team staffing. I know it's a lot of information. You'll have a chance to, have this in your inbox if you'd like me to send it to you. So we also set the relative weights. I explained that a minute ago. All of this really contributes to a process that is comprehensive, equitable, and really brings forward the voices of those who are participating in this process. I think I already talked about the subject matter experts, so I'll skip over that right now. Great list of individuals who contributed to this and developed the desirability criteria. And then we're at the point where we're submitting project idea information. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. I'm also going to switch over to a live window so you guys can see us walk through this process. Okay. Let me do that.
Any questions before we go
Yeah.
to this next part? Is it confusing? Does it make sense? Does it
Makes sense.
make sense?
Mhm. So Kevin, I'm going to start you at an email that
Okay.
people will start,
Okay.
we'll get in their inboxes.
Okay. So actually, I think everything you've seen before this is not the fun part. I think now is the fun part, because the strategic team is looking for projects. And the project can be anything you think of. And one of the warnings I always want to tell people when they get into this part of the process: don't self-select out your projects. If you have a project idea, submit it, okay? You'll see some of the things that it asks for when we get to the form. One of the things it'll ask for is to estimate the cost of the project. I tell people this all the time: you might have the solution to anti-gravity and it costs $80 billion. Put it in, not enough for the Village of Romeo, but don't self-select out your projects, because the final step of this effort in this process is project selection based on strategic impact, real value of the project, ultimately to the strategic goal of the village, okay? So what'll happen is the people that are going to be able to put in projects are going to get an email, looks just like this, and in this email there's a check this link. And by the way, if somebody wants to, if you have a project idea and you want me to type it in, we can just put that in as a sample, or I could just make something up, okay? And so you're going to get, the link's going to take you to a screen that looks just like this, and you go up here to submit a new project, right, and a project name. So does anybody have a project they want to, or I'll just make one up if you want.
Sidewalk repairs.
Okay, great. And you put in a project description. Fix the sidewalks? Is it just? Obviously, some projects might need some description so people understand better what they are. Okay. Estimated project cost.
$50,000.
Okay. I don't know if I have to put in a dollar sign or not, so I'm just going to put in $50,000. Okay. We don't have any files to upload, but if this is called a project owner, everybody can put projects in. It's called an owner. If you had something you wanted to upload, you could. I'm going to save this. Okay. And then I'm going to go over here to cost schedule screen. So calendar start year.
2024.
Okay. How about the calendar quarter?
Second quarter.
So right now, April to June, okay, okay. Completion year? When do you think it might be completed? So would it run into next year, or late this year, or?
I don't know, I guess, because I'm thinking
Could be.
So do I have to decide that before I put that in? Or will it-
It's just, okay, if you just thought about all the sidewalks that needed repair, I realize that some don't need repair right now, and then they might need repair later, but you could just think about, it's a 1-year project, a 2-year project, is it something, okay, so let's try 2026. This part of the project form just has to do with some ability in the software to kind of develop an implementation plan and timeline. That's why it's asking for this information. The strategic impact of the project, that's going to come when I hit the scoring button next to the cost schedule up there. So we'll just say we want it complete by, we want to complete in the second quarter of 2026, because we want the sidewalks to be nice by the summertime. Okay. There's some other things here that, like this revenue source, we haven't populated anything in here, but if you knew that was going to come from maybe a certain bucket of funds, or it's going to come from state funding or something, we could actually identify some revenue sources that would appear in the drop-down. So you're not really going to have to worry about that right now. There's a couple other things down here about managing revenue sources. You can just leave these blank. Okay.
Excuse me, what does this have to do with electric vehicles?
It has to do with,
The whole thing was about electric vehicles, either bringing companies in, or we're gonna have stations. I mean, this is,
so this was about, if you go back to the strategic goal here,
yeah,
which I'd have to go back so I could read it, but it's really talking about an effort to help the village be resilient to change. So you're being impacted at some level by the shift from ICE to EV. Yes? So
yes, but that, I guess I assumed this was going to be how the village was going to support or get support in having to move forward. In other words, would we be bringing in electric vehicle companies or
okay,
manufacturers to these companies?
okay.
Or would we be bringing in charging stations, or would we have things like this, rather than, okay, garbage pickup or sidewalks and.
So let's,
It's got nothing to do with electric vehicles, which is what this is all entitled.
okay, so for example, charging stations is probably a good example, right? That would be a project, to put charging stations in. Right, that's a project idea.
And my other question then from that would be, is that really a village responsibility, or is that more the gas station's responsibility?
That I don't know. I don't know who pays for those charging stations and how that works. But any idea that you have that essentially helps achieve the goal that has been established here, it could be any project that in some way, shape, or form you think it's going to have an impact on that goal. And again, I wouldn't self-select out. If you wanted to put in a project to have a media campaign to attract companies that support electric vehicle manufacturing, I'd put that in as a project. Don't pre-select it out, because you're going to go through a scoring process here where the actual person submitting the project, you're going to score your own project, and then that's going to come out in a graphic that shows the impact of that project versus all the other project ideas that come in. So, sometimes part of this process is about, and Carmen mentioned it, about removing bias in all of the process. So sometimes what happens is, and I've seen this in companies all the time, okay? We get a group of people together and they start talking about projects, and whose project gets selected. It's not always the most objective, non-biased process. Okay? This is a process that tries to remove that. So every idea is a good idea, and all the ideas get measured against the strategic impact of the idea and some other criteria. So this is not, although this effort was started because of the impact to the village, because of the closure of the Ford plant, so it came under this EV tip program. It's not just projects that relate specifically to electric vehicles. It could be any project.
And through the Future Mobilities Initiative, I'll say that there are different programs and initiatives. This is just one of those. So building the foundation with the strategic plan is first to identify what the motivation of the village is, the businesses, residents, and with it also a nod to the visitors. And then to think about what would actually is achievable, who might lead that, getting to your question, whose responsibility would these projects be? And then how can we find resources to do that? So it is comprehensive, but it's not all just talking about electric vehicles. The funding was because of the shift from ICE to EV, which was the closure of the plant. Yeah. That's why Romeo was identified to receive this assistance. Yeah. But I think Kevin's right. You know, really, the sky's the limit in terms of ideas. But I think you all know best, you know, what fits within your target goals right now, as well as what's gonna maybe move the needle for stabilization here in the village.
Does that help? I hope it helps. So it's just not limited.
I'm not totally sure, I guess,
Okay.
exactly. I guess based on what you just said, it's really kind of supporting the budget hole that by Ford moving out that we would have. I mean, that's kind of what I heard you say there, because now that we're switching out from ICE to EV, you're not really bringing in EV, you're just kind of trying to readjust that money.
So there was consideration and analysis done to the economic impacts of the plant. And so there's some data to support that. And there were, you know, changes due to the village's budget as it relates to that. But those, we're not here to be, I guess, municipal financial experts. We're here to help carve out a plan to help either mitigate impacts or to, you know, listen to the community in terms of, you know, what would be some strategies to move forward with this opportunity. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If it's, let me give you an example of another community we're working with. These are public funds and it's in the news, so I can mention. We're working in downriver Wayne County, okay? And they have 2 coal-fired plants that close out of a different initiative, not EV tip, but out of a coal-fired plant pool of money. Again, likewise, the community isn't going to replace the loss of that plant, meaning, you know, River Rouge and Trenton. They're still owned by DTE, right? The engine plant's still owned by Ford. What services can the state provide to help the village here, as well as those communities, strengthen either other industries in the area or support the businesses and residents and the village leadership with the direction that they want to go? So I know it seems like it's kind of circumventing the plant parcel of land. There's other conversations around that. You know, Megan's involved in those conversations, will help as needed. The state is already talking about like the land. That might be, you know, something that comes down the line in the future, will remain plugged in. We're helping with other initiatives that could be part of it. And it could be where the village says, hey, we want to embrace the electric vehicle movement. How can we attract a manufacturer, as Kevin said? Or as he said in his introduction, we have other services. If you have those that might be part of the supply chain, we can help with diversification strategies or help with a, you know, K-12 pipeline to get, you know, young residents trained, you know, for businesses that are here. Or we could support beautification, infrastructure repair, which are some of the other ideas that are coming up. Yeah. So it's a little bit more holistic, but hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Okay, so you can skip, you're going to be able to skip past the phases. And I'm going to save this. And then we're going to go into the scoring. So if you remember, on the strategic scorecard, there was the goal, there were 4 priorities, and then there were all these objectives underneath. Okay? And you need to work on the objectives to achieve the priority that contributes to the strategic goal. That's how it works. Okay? Every project idea that's submitted, the project owner, the project submitter, is going to score their own project. And so in this particular case, This was one of the priorities, livability in great neighborhoods, and it was under the quality of life. Did I say priorities or objectives? This was one of the objectives that was under the quality of life priority. And the project owner is simply going to come in here and drag this slide until you think you've positioned it. And I know this is probably kind of hard to read. So if the project has no impact at all on livability in great neighborhoods, you don't move the slider. Just has no impact, okay? If it has some impact, this says low desirability is public communication about all projects. Medium desirability in this case is, it includes that low description plus public meetings for projects and or, even I can't read that. A mechanism for resident feedback, yeah. Okay. And then high desirability includes both low and medium, and it says residents are actively involved, e.g. a steering committee or an advisory committee, or the project scoring model includes criteria for resident feedback. So if you just think about the repairing the sidewalks, if I started dragging that slider, does it feel like you want to stop it in any particular place?
I'd go at least 3/4 of the way down.
So you would go about over here,
Yeah.
okay?
Maybe even a little bit more. There you go.
Okay?
You want it all the way down?
That's good.
Right there.
Good sidewalks are a big positive.
There, yeah.
Here's another objective, downtown vitality. This is for residents now. Remember Carmen said there's one for, that's more for the businesses. This one says low desire, I'm not going to do all of these, but I just want you to see how to do this. Low desirability, it directly addresses historic quality and preservation of the downtown buildings, or it adds to small town charm. Probably does, I see heads going up and down, probably does at least that. Medium desirability, it does all that, plus it creates business attraction opportunities in line with historic quality and preservation, or creates events and programming in downtown. And high desirability, it includes everything before that, and increases accessibility in downtown, and increases vibrancy in downtown, and creates a diversity of goods and services in downtown. How far would you drag the slider in that one? All the way.
Yep. It's a walking community, so.
Okay? So just to show you, I'm just going to go down through this real quick and just grab things and move them around, right? So rather than going through every single one of these. Transportation and walkability, accessibility. Asset management probably has some impact because it's an asset. Safety,
Pretty high.
I'll put that way up here. This is still about the priority of asset management, effective asset management. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to put things anywhere, okay?
Kevin, also, can you hover over those little eyes, just for the future? If you guys hover over those little yellow or gold eyes, like lowercase I, it has a description.
Yep.
If you guys wonder what that means, downtown vitality for businesses, you hover over that I and you can see the description for all of those. Yep. So in this case, there were about 12 objectives, so you'll be scoring for all 12 objectives. And it's okay if your project, has very low desirability for one of them. That's okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the last two here are complexity and urgency. So low desirability for complexity says it involves one unit or department for approval. And medium desirability says it involves public and/or involves the public and/or involves multiple departments or organizations for approvals, or there's regulatory requirements. And high desirability is defined as involves public and involves multiple departments, organizations, and multiple regulatory requirements, okay?
So there's a
So-
difference between the and the or.
So
There's a suggestion for medium.
is a suggestion for medium?
Yeah,
Okay,
because the DDA and the village have to work together on that.
okay. And then urgency, low urgency is long-term or non-essential improvements for village residents and businesses. High urgency is immediate improvements in safety, security, and/or health of community residents and businesses. So, so these two objectives will always be in every strategic plan that's ever done. So there's just always a complexity question and always an urgency question. So that's how you score a project. Okay. And so that's everything we needed to do to enter this project. Is there another slide beyond that? Or is
No,
that's, I believe that's it, right?
once you
It's entered.
enter your project, and then once you score your project and you hit save, you won't be able to see all the other projects. You'll, only have saved your own. If you would like to do more, you go back to the first bubble, which says general, and right underneath the word repair, general, and then what you can do is select, yeah, I think if you click that, Kevin,
That went right back to this particular project. Let me click this here.
oh, yep, I apologize, you're
Okay.
right. You take
Just
it back
click
to
the
that one
arrow.
and do a new
Yep.
project,
And do a
sorry
new
for my
project.
error. Yep. And so you'll be able to see the projects that you submitted. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to demonstrate.
That's what we want to show
today.
you.
And why would you want to see them? Is something going to be happening to them behind the scenes?
There is something happening behind the scenes
I mean,
as you're,
that we would need to check on?
Mm, I'm gonna say no. Once you've entered your project and scored your project, the reason you don't see the next step is you might start to look at it and go like,
I'm just wondering why you have a button for them to see your project.
oh, this is just a list of all the projects.
Mhm.
So as,
You might want to edit one of them if you changed your mind on it, or delete it if you don't want it in there.
if you wanted to go back, you could do that. So we could go back to this one, for
Mhm.
example,
You're right,
and you
there
could
is an
hit,
edit button.
you can hit edit.
Maybe I have more information now, it's not whatever that is, 50,000, it's a million.
Yeah, yep, you could go back and do that.
Yeah, that's just the screen it takes you back to for editing purposes as well as if you want to enter a new project. So from previous engagements that we've had individuals just submit one project and somebody who submits 5 or somebody who submits 10. Again, there's no rule for that. You're able to go back and add more. And you'll likely only see your projects there. You won't be able to see the projects that others put forward.
And then is there a stop date? You can keep adding projects? or-
Yeah, so we were gonna keep this open for a week, so through close of business next Wednesday. We'll put that in the email that we send out tomorrow, so hopefully people get a chance to think about it. As Kevin has said, there's a place for the name of the project. Be as descriptive as possible, just so people understand the name. And then also in your description, there's no particular character limit, you can describe it there, and bring information forward, yeah.
If I could just.
Yeah.
So all of the boards, all of the elected officials, we are all putting in these projects, requests. If you, as a trustee, want to go talk to a neighbor about what would you want for vitality, then you are welcome to put that in. If the tree board says, hey, I want to go to a neighbor about a tree, as the professionals and the point people in our areas, we're the ones putting in the projects. It doesn't mean that you can't go grab them from all the people and business owners, talking to business owners. The DDA represents all the business owners. You could go ask everybody else throughout the week, hey, what would you guys like to see in there? And put it in there. But this way it reduces reduced it down to like 40 or 50 people instead of 3,700. So that's where we're at. Everybody in the whole village is, is welcome to throw a project through a board member, any of our board members.
And then on the back end, this is all auto
So
populating.
eventually,
into
this
a-
will get to I want to say a flat,
Graph.
Yeah.
graph.
Yeah, Graham.
And then that will all be, yeah.
Yep. Thank you, that's very clear.
So this is live now?
It's live now. Tomorrow you will get your email. So-
Tomorrow, okay.
Yeah, so provide us with your email address, with the sign up.
So tomorrow, and did you say cutoff is a week from tomorrow?
Yeah.
What's the reason for that cutoff?
We have a follow-up meeting on that Friday where we can start to look at the projects that are coming in. So, we're hoping that, Kevin and I were talking about that on the way over. We were gonna talk to, the strategy team about keeping it open if they want to, and that's fine to let projects keep rolling in. We just want something to start to talk about come Friday.
Yeah, from what I can see so far, I would hate to limit it as far as just a week, how it is difficult to get information out. So, just whether it's people not in this room, it may take a week for them to even learn about this.
Yeah. Good
So
point.
maybe a cutoff would be great, but then maybe there would be a date where we can open it up. I don't know if this would be maybe being a point person or what have you, to maybe we do another week next month or something like that. I don't
Well,
know.
how long do we have this tool for?
Mhm. So the software is through the engagement. So right now, we're targeting, through the summer, and we're hoping to start on projects soon. So there's gonna have to be a time where there's a selection of projects. And the strategy team will talk about those, based on alignment and cost. The state is offering, $100,000 to do a project or projects, depending on what's needed, so there's no limit to one. But I know that there's a lot of complexity around timing, capacity for departments, any other considerations that Kevin pointed out through kind of urgency and complexity. But as we said, even with this engagement, we're not looking to, end our engagement. We're hoping just to kind of kickstart things. So there might have to be some, somewhat hard conversation just to say, okay, what can we do now, with this funding, and then, have a future investment of funding. But you're right, the software piece, we're hoping to, run a report with projects. So let's us talk and figure out how long to keep that open, because your points are valid. Yeah.
Well, I think that was even one of my project thoughts was how can we put it in as a scored project of buying this sort of software so we can continually have this non-biased
Mhm.
focus of strategies.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great suggestion too. So right now, our license is through EGI, but communities have purchased this as something, and then they keep managing it. And quite frankly, the suggestion is to really look at your strategic plan, every year or every couple years, and put more projects in depending on the need and the kind of climate of the village. Yeah. So there have been, with companies and both local governments, purchase the software and a training that goes along with it.
So currently, depending on the time frame that we're told, as far as when is the cutoff, the amount of projects is gonna be determined by the amount of money. You said $100,000.
Yeah,
No.
I hesitated about saying that because of what Kevin said, don't limit yourself. Because really the idea is to take this momentum right now and say what's needed, right? And then it would be more on our end and the other connections we have to say, okay, where might there be some other funding, right? There might be some things that are already underneath your master plan that are already funded, that you guys
Yeah.
are putting forward saying, hey, we really need to do this, but you see where it rises up in priority, the village might already have funding for something like that. So that's why I don't want to,
That's a really great question, and it's ironic in one sense. The tool is very much designed to help you select projects based on their complexity, their urgency, and their strategic impact. As soon as we bring cost into it, okay, it's like, oh, we can't do that project, it's too big. But it might be the most meaningful project that you could possibly do, And then the challenge to the team would be, where could we find funding to do that? So we don't want you to think in terms of a dollar limit. No, don't think about that $100,000. That's just in addition to the budget that the village already has to do projects. This is to help put context around projects to help you make the decisions of those projects that have the most impact. And by the way, it's not going to tell you what projects to pick. You will still pick the projects that you want to do.
And this is an opportunity for all of the stakeholders and all of our boards and all of the residents to say what we want, not what the leadership wants. Everybody, and the more we throw at this and we can put in here, we can use this for the future.
Mhm.
If we don't get to continue with the software, then we have that. So throw them all in there right now so we can print that out and have the information.
I like that each department or each board is putting ideas in here, and we may see that there's 3 boards have the same ideas, and then now it's coming together, and it's not in a silo anymore. The DDA isn't trying to do this on their own. Maybe planning wants to do it or whatever, and now we're seeing that this is a high priority for 3 boards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great observation.
Will we know which board it came from though? Or is this just?
You'll know whose name put it into the software. If the person who's putting it in wants to put their description that, it came from talking to these committees or boards, or maybe there's other activity that's already started, you can provide that description.
It's not anonymous.
It's not anonymous who put it in there. The project owner doesn't necessarily mean that's the person responsible. It'll be aligned to, whatever kind of department or entity. It might be a project for the DDA, it might be a project for the chamber, it might be a project for, one of the village departments, DPW, somewhere else. So that'll be, just because somebody submitted the project doesn't mean, of course, they're solely responsible for it. It's a lot to think about. Well, I'll wrap up by telling you what the next steps are. If you have more questions, throw them at us. I'm going to go back to here. So Kevin walked through submitting the project idea. So this screen looks very familiar. It's just talking about a form here. We'll send out this PowerPoint in case you have to go back and reference like what the steps are. I'm going to quickly go through here. This is what Kevin already shared. So the scoring idea, again, aligning with the priorities. This is a representation of what the graph will look like. It's a little overwhelming to take a look at it, but I will briefly tell you that the colors relate to the urgency. So the red represents those projects that the project owner, the project submitter said, this is really urgent. Like, this is a safety issue. There's a reason why it's urgent. The yellow, there's a medium urgency, and the green is a low urgency. The size of the bubble indicates the anticipated project cost. So again, don't limit yourself with putting an anticipated cost. If you don't know the cost, that's fine too. You don't have to put it in there. You don't have to necessarily guess, but this shows the alignment, and we go over what this means. We interpret it when we meet with the strategy team. We already went to the live stream, and this is basically another walkthrough of what we already did. So you'll get this in your inbox with all these instructions. You'll have our contact information if you want to pick up the phone and have us walk you through it. If not, you'll have these slides with the instructions, everything that Kevin already walked through. So I'm going to just kind of quickly advance. You'll see all the same things outlined here. And we're on to next steps. So our next steps are, we've got a meeting on Friday the 19th where Kevin and I are coming back. We're going to talk about what's been submitted so far. We're going to talk about what it means, talk about the strategic alignment, start to talk about projects, talking about an implementation phase, spring through summer. We're working with the state right now to talk about what our window is. If there's a particular end date of spending the money, we'll share that back with the strategy team. An anticipated wrap-up could be early fall, but that's dependent on what the projects are. So we're here through the duration of that. We'll help manage this as well and hopefully really set a good, solid foundation for some new initiatives here in the village. Yeah, so I'll see if there are any other kind of questions. And you'll have our contact information. Yes?
So, in an effort to make an unbiased system, I put in $50,000 for sidewalks. I could be way high, I could be way low. But we're only as good as the information we have. So all those bubbles could be way off because we don't know.
Mhm.
How do you filter that into something that you actually becomes more accurate?
Yeah, that's great. So we'll have access to all of the projects. We'll talk to the strategy team and we'll check for accuracy. You know, if there's something that we have to dig a little bit more to find out what a true cost would be, that's why it's a living strategy, it's a living document, so we can go back in and make those changes too. It's not, once the submitter submits it, no changes can be made. There can be changes that are made to it, but we would check in with the project submitter as well and just say, hey, you know, is this accurate? Is this based on some, you know, quote that we've gotten in the past or previous expenditures? Yeah, so there's a way to go back and manage the submissions.
That survey is still very subjective. Like, to me, sidewalks are a high priority. It might not be to somebody else.
Well, it's subjective, yeah, to you, but then once it's measured up against all of the others and based on the criteria, then the strategic alignment shows like, okay, well, where, again, either there's gonna be multiple people that put in similar projects, but it also doesn't limit people. So your project idea is just as valid as anybody else's. It was put on there for a reason. You can describe it in your description of what the need is so that the strategy team can look at it either now or in the future, you know, and really dig into it. It really should be used as a tool. It's created to be actionable with public engagement and public input, backed by the descriptions that you provided. Yeah. So there's some subjectivity, but we don't know what each other's putting in until we take a look at it. Yeah.
So there's a couple other things. We have the ability, that bubble graph, could you bring that back up?
Yeah.
This is just an FYI. Okay, we can turn off the cost. And you can see a bubble graph where the cost is not there. So all the bubbles are the same size.
Yep, just different colors for
Just
urgency.
because, you know, when I look at that, I'm always drawn to that upper right-hand corner, those two gigantic red circles. They have very high strategic impact towards the goal. They're very complex. They're immediately urgent and they cost a lot of money, relatively speaking. It's like, I mean, just looking at that, I don't want to do those projects. But they may be great projects to do. The projects in this upper left-hand quadrant, look at that little small yellow circle up there. It's relatively low in complexity. It's kind of medium urgency. It has high strategic impact and it's not very costly. That's kind of what happens when we get into the selection phase. And one more thing, when any project owner is putting their projects in, make sure you're reading those low, medium, and high desirabilities, because sometimes they're worded in such a way. If you had an inclination, I'm just going to score my projects high, sometimes that's going to hurt your project. So you really have to watch those descriptions. And that's not because we forced it to be that way. That's the way the descriptions got defined. Sometimes high desirability is not what you want. So
once again, I think based on, related to one of Shelley's questions regarding the cost, I don't know how many of us, I certainly speak for myself, are gonna know these costs. Leave it blank
yeah, you could leave it blank or put zero blank. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
instead of just throwing in 50,000 for sidewalks, which who knows?
Yeah, it's not going to reduce the impact of your project. I mean, leaving that blank is fine. There's only a few cells that are required on that project form, and the other ones are for additional information that you have.
So, I mean, unless you're a professional in that field, it seems like you should just leave those blank all the time.
Yeah, you can do that.
Because who knows what tomorrow brings anyways, so.
Yeah, and we're not asking you to go out and do like the research or get bids or do anything like that. This is really, you know, allows another forum for, you know, community engagement, input to talk about what's needed from the position you fill in the community. Other questions?
Who is the strategic team?
Yeah, the strategic team is, I'm gonna probably blank on everybody's name. So, Megan, of course. We've got Catherine, we've got Caroline, we've got, I'm blanking on people's last name. I can share that out with you. We have the representative from the DPW. You go ahead, yeah.
Tim Mett's our supervisor. We had Danielle Lee from DEA, Andrea St. Laurent from DEA, and then we had Kelly Stevens from the chamber. I think that was it.
Yes.
Those were a lot.
So they're all local.
Well, it was the,
What was it?
Jim Steiner, he was invited to the initial one.
Yep.
I don't know how that worked if you.
Yeah, invited, I think it was people who accepted the invitation. Yep, it was extended.
It was trying to get all the major stakeholders in the, for the areas that we talked about. So business, which DBA, chamber, bigger business, village,
Mhm.
residents,
DPW.
and
Mhm.
the professionals in some of those areas.
Mhm. Yep.
So residents were just by default of who was invited. You didn't have a specific single resident just representing resident. It was just, because we're all residents. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mhm. And then if there was, based on the objectives that were developed, if there was a feeling that there wasn't somebody that was part of the strategic team that had that like expertise, then there were additional individuals we reached out to, and those ended up being from the organizations that were more regional organizations. So we talked to SEMCOG, we talked to MML, the Main Street Association as well. We talked about like placemaking and walkability and some of the other insights there. Mhm. We also talked to an individual from the Historical Association, and we have a list of the individuals we talked to. Mhm.
Meg, if I may ask you, is related at all to the presentation from last night from the high school? Can any of that be involved in this, or?
Well, we're talking two separate things. The high school is specifically ideas of what the board property could be. This is more supportive, improving the village with or without whatever that property could be.
Okay, so
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, their project is, okay, fine.
Mhm.
Not really good.
Yeah, they're more that actual property, and this is more the rest.
Mhm. Yep. There's, there was talk about, aligning, efforts as well. And so these are working on similar tracks. And so the bridge would be, Megan, who sits on, and others that sit on, all of these initiatives to make sure that there's alignment there. But Megan's right. From where we sit and through this initiative, outside of myself sitting on the task force, we don't have the resources to talk about the actual land. And that's not what this is for. So I know that the name is somewhat misleading, Electric Vehicle Transition Project. We didn't come up with the name, somebody at the state did. But the idea is that the efforts work together, and there's a stacking of resources to really move the needle for the village. Mhm. Yeah. We'd love to know, how, the school initiative is going. I hear things in the task force meeting. So if there's some alignment there, working with the residents who are of the younger generation into this, that would be wonderful too. Mhm. And the school system. All right. I don't know if there are any other questions, but I just want to thank you for your time. It's greatly appreciated. All your questions were really thoughtful, gave us some things to think about back in the office, to follow up with Megan about. We encourage you to sign up on the form there, being in the leadership position, to make sure you get one of these emails. And I think we're going to just talk about and follow up with you about maybe a first deadline of projects, and then maybe a beyond that deadline. We're certainly not wanting to close things, in haste. All right. So thank you so much. Have a really good evening, and feel free to reach out to us. Yeah. Thank you.